This headline from The Hill: most young men are single, most young women are not. More single young men now live with their parents than a romantic partner.
The U.S. economy has experienced a hollowing out of the jobs in the middle that used to be common among men without college degrees.
Young men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of young women.
The percentage of wealth that young people control under the age of 40 has been cut from 12% to 6%. These are concerted, deliberate decisions to make it harder and more expensive for people to find each other, for people to mate, and for people to have children.
If you don't mind, I kind of want to start with like our discussion about teenage boys. Because something that you and I talked about was basically like the way we talked about doing this episode might actually outline the nation's sentiment and why this has gone. The teenage boy epidemic or the male epidemic has gotten so bad. It may be because our attitudes about it are basically the same as everyone else's. When you and I talked about doing this episode, we both kind of like gave a scale of how interested we were and how much we empathize or how much we identify with young men, and that is to say not very much. Like, am I accurate in saying that? Is that being unfair?
No, it is, and my patience with them wanes at best. I have a small business where I employ for anywhere from 7 to 10 men in their late teens, early 20s. And my joke with my customers is young men are, and this is going to sound terrible, but it's what I say to almost every single customer that I go out and do an estimate for. I do the sales side. I say, you ever work with young men? They're kind of like puppies. They're extremely cute and extremely dumb.
and when you say dumb, do you mean like low IQ or
No, they're very high energy. They're very tough. They're very physically. I mean, they can stay. They're resilient, if nothing else. They just seem to have a lot of wasted energy. They seem to aim all their energy in destructive ways, and they seem to have very strong opinions.
Okay.
Without a lot of experience. And I never wanted to be one of those guys that, these dumb kids,
Right.
Because I find those people annoying too. Us older people who know everything, well, damn it, we're still making the same mistakes we've been making for 20 years. So why, we should know better.
So what would you tell young teenager Todd as way of advice? Like to not waste that energy, to not have so much energy misdirected, to not make the mistakes you're talking about.
I'd say pointing at improving yourself. As a young man, I think I pointed way too much of my energy towards athletics, and I didn't point enough things on just improving. And I think a lot of times families who have structure, who make their kids go to college, you're forced to try different things, or if the parents have different interests and they let you follow them. I felt like I was kind of forced into this. Not forced, but everyone was just so I'd spend my whole day playing basketball as opposed to taking a Toastmasters class, taking an acting class, anything, sewing, just something different, and being open to, there's nothing wrong with me. I like what I'm doing. I mean, when you spend 5 hours a day playing basketball and you're not going to be in the NBA, it's just a bad use of your energy.
Yeah.
What would you tell young Joe? You were pretty mature, I'm guessing, at your age, considered in your peer group.
I was very mature, but I was also I had a lot of resentment and anger issues. And now that I'm older and I've been through therapy and I've talked to people and I've socialized a lot, I've calibrated and had a ton of public speaking experience, a ton of experience like talking to people who are smarter than me and who figured out life. I realize now that a lot of my resentment issues back when I was in, a young man, like teens and 20s, a lot of that was because I was intelligent enough to where I should have been taking classes in college, and I was intelligent enough that I should have been using that for something. But because of a total lack of opportunities and a lack of resources and a lack of guidance, that was completely wasted. I spent all of that time on video games. I spent all of that time doing physical stuff I didn't really need to. Like you did basketball, me it was martial arts. I was burning myself out almost intentionally all the time with boundless energy on nothing,
Right.
and I really regret that.
Yeah, yeah, beating people up is not as you don't use that as much as you think you would in the rest of your life,
Right? Yeah.
right? um, this is I met this woman at church, and her daughter. She had a 10-year-old daughter, and this kid was just a charmer. And this was a single mom, so she has one daughter who's 10, who I met, and she was telling me about her older brother who's 19. And I guess they showed me pictures of him, and he's 6'9". He played high school football and was very good, and now he works a couple shifts at Starbucks, makes maybe 15 hours a week. He stays up to 4 o'clock in the morning, obnoxiously playing video games. And he's severely, severely depressed. He's gained 100 pounds, so he was already a big guy at 6 foot, whatever he was,
Yeah.
well over 200. Now he's well over 300. And they say that it's hard for them to sleep because he'll be yelling, swearing at his friends he's playing video games with all over the years. At 3 o'clock in the morning when she has to get up to go to school, mom has to get up to go to work to support them. And I feel like that's a common thing in a lot of people's houses nowadays. They have this grown man child who is absolutely doing nothing and getting more and more depressed and spiraling downward emotionally.
Yeah. That spiral, that is what the country is in right now as a whole, and that's what we're talking about today. That is the crux of the entire episode. Is we are talking about newspapers have called it the male epidemic. People talk about toxic masculinity is a phrase for it, or just uh, I'm trying to think of lost masculinity is another way I've heard of it. What it really kind of boils down to is we don't have anything for young men to do anymore. There's no job they can get without a serious degree that will support them in the future. So like, there's no factory they can go work at that will seriously support them unless they get really lucky.
No,
Like,
it's Amazon, and
yeah,
it's
the Amazon factory instead of a Detroit car factory.
right, which is it
Um,
has no future, and they're just going to work them to death, loading trucks until they don't need them anymore.
Yeah, union support is at an all-time high, but union membership is at an all-time low. It's almost as low as the Reagan era. So, like, we're going to go through the statistics of why things look so bleak for young men, and we're talking young, like age 14 to 20, mid 20s is the age we're talking about. Um, and we're just going to very quickly go down the list of what this is doing. Is you and I, Todd, what we just discussed is we were aimless. We wish our efforts had been put into productive things. We could have benefited from a Todd or Joe coming to us and saying, "How about try this instead?" What we got was we got at least I got wisdom from a generation before me that actually thought those factory jobs are going to be available without a degree, and a generation before me that thought if you do get a degree, you can take on massive loans to do it, and it'll pay itself off. What we are looking at now is a huge population of young men who half of the rate of them getting or going for college degrees is cut in half because they know that it won't pay itself off. Most degrees just incur debt. And there was the Time article that we covered months ago about how like you usually won't break even on a degree if you consider how much debt it puts you into versus how much more money it will make you. Um, the suicide rates for just teens in general, because the economy is so bad. And by the way, everything I say in this, please go to our links and look at our studies. We're pulling from the most respectable sources we can, so that these aren't. We're not opening arguments. What we're doing is we're just looking at sort of the scope of the dilemma for young men right now. Suicide rates for teens have tripled. That's CDC, and that's I've got a compilation article from Upworthy that kind of like has a bunch of sources listed. Teens generally, suicide rates have tripled, and it's because of hopelessness. It is a lot of times, the quote from this is it's social isolation. It is Facebook. It is it's social media making them feel inadequate, and it's knowing that they don't really have a future. And when I say they don't have a future, it's homes are you have to spend $500,000 in the Austin area to get a home here. Same thing with Portland. Same thing with Spokane. It's closer to $1 million in New York. So like generally, when I say they don't have a future, what I mean is economically they won't have assets like the generation before them. They just won't.
It's funny you
Um,
say that because there's this new meme on Facebook and YouTube that's this young man in his mid 20s, and he says that when a woman in his 50s flirts with him, he he stands up real straight and says, "This might be my only chance for home ownership. I better not blow this."
right. Oh my
and
god.
and that's his whole platform. And so there's some truth to it if he's connected with millions and millions of 20 something men.
Yeah. We were watching the Jeopardy champion finals with Rachel's family a couple days ago, and while we're watching it, the lead champion wins $500,000 on a final question. And then I turn to everybody. I'm like, "Hey, 50,000 more, and he can afford the average home in the Austin area, like the Austin Metro."
Yeah.
So like, yeah, no, it's fucking crazy. So generally speaking, if you come from a family that isn't well off and isn't going to hand you land or a house as part of like your endowment, like as you come of age, if they don't hand you a piece of property, then you're not going to own one, with the economy the way it is. And that means that you will the what is it, the book The Richest Man in Babylon. The first rule of becoming wealthy is own your own home, so that you're not paying somebody else for the rest of your life, and that's not going to happen.
But you're still going to work hard your whole life and be stressed out and everything. You just
Oh yeah, no, we don't want to take that away from people. There will still be hard work and stress, and there will still be things to work on. But yeah, generally speaking, if you are a young man these days, you're financially you don't have hope for assets unless you are given them or you win Jeopardy. And there's going to be pushback. Anyone who's listening to this and they're a money manager or they're into economy or something, they're going to be like, well, you set them up with an account very young, you have them pay into it at, from these ages on, and even a small amount can accrue. Yeah, that's all great planning, but it's not the majority of people. Most people do not have that information at their fingertips, and they don't have a mentor in their life that can tell them that.
and I don't think that those things really figure in what really the economics of inflation and what things really cost. I
Right.
think they're stuck in another, they're stuck in, rent mortgages this much when it's not. Everything's doubled, and that they haven't raised their bar on what food cost and what everything cost.
Right. So everybody feels like they are struggling right now. Everyone across the board. But if you are young, if you were born after 2008, the financial crisis, and when homes started going to corporations, if you were born after 2008, it looks like this is the way it's always been, and it looks like it's going to be this way forever. So your hope for financial independence is basically nil. Um, Also, there are theories about how school isn't really built for young boys anymore. Um, the idea that you have a lot of testosterone and hormones and energy, like you and I talked about how much energy you have young. The idea that you should sit still and take tests, and like the life is one big marshmallow test. If you know the term I'm using, the marshmallow test is in psychology. It's delayed gratification. You put a marshmallow in front of a kid and you leave the room and you tell them, if you don't eat that marshmallow, when I come back in 50 minutes, you'll get two of them. And any boy that, or any young person who is able to like delay gratification and eat the marshmallow after they sort of like fight themselves and hide under the table or just look somewhere else or whatever they do, if you can delay that gratification, then it's linked to you having that forever. Like you'll have better schooling, you'll make more money, you'll do all this stuff. that isn't a test for young men oftentimes, and school is built around that test. School is, if you can have self-discipline, take all these tests, do all this homework, do all this without having a financial end in sight, without having a game plan, without the promise of having a house ever. It's do all these things for 14 to 18 years on the hopes that you eventually get smart enough to get a degree and then be a really good renter. um,
Well, I remember this too. We can all remember that the girls sitting quietly in class, turning in their homework, not
Thank
fooling
you.
around, not
Yeah.
talking. And my mom is a tutor, and she does group classes. She works with kids with dyslexia and all kinds of learning disabilities. But when she does the group classes together, when they finish their assignment, she says, "Well, let me see what you got." The boys will aggressively shove their paper at my mom, which she's used to, like it's a race, like they're
Yeah.
jamming this thing in a ballot box. You know, they're just really, like you said, you almost have to take them out and run them around the neighborhood a bit. And you could see why a teacher who has 30 students would favor these well-behaved, well-mannered, sitting still, don't have to go to the bathroom girls, right?
Right, absolutely. Thank you for bringing me back on track. I kind of went back into the economy there, but that's dead on. Is there's a lot of argument right now about whether the reason why male applicants are disappearing for colleges, whether that's actually because the money thing, or maybe it's because schools are not accounting for how immature young boys are. It doesn't favor them in the way they test and the way they have 50 students per class nowadays, and they're all supposed to learn from like packets or like from laptops. Like it's we're getting less and less supervised learning and more disciplined delayed gratification learning, and it's not, young men aren't built for that really. um, the Washington Post had a great article, and it talked about how I'll just read this quote. It says, "If present trends continue, women earning college degrees in the United States will soon outnumber men 2 to 1." And that's the near future. Is it will be double women going to college over men, and the
Double?
people yeah, double. Um, this is going to sound grotesque that I would even talk about this, but there was a college counselor I was reading on Reddit, and they're in admissions and they do counseling and they talk to people, and they were talking about, this is a woman counselor, and she was saying that young girls in school are getting pissed off and angry because the guys attending college, because there's more and more women and less men, they're saying that they have something called golden dick syndrome, which is any guy who's in a graduate program or in a getting an advanced degree, they have their pick of anybody
It's
of a
yeah,
mate.
a way prettier girl than they get, that they should get, right?
Right, like this some
supply,
schlub with like,
supply and demand, and he's got models all.
right, he has his pick of any woman because he, like, some schlub who has like his dad's money and is going to school on a free ride is like, yeah, there's double. It's don't worry, those ladies will be or those guys will be happy when they get to the nursing home in 70 years, and it's again all women and just a couple men.
Isn't that a selling point to young men? You go to college, you can get a beautiful girlfriend, way out of your league. It should
Right.
be. It should. We need to advertise this.
That would be a great sort of recruitment campaign, but the problem is it gets back to economy. It's like, well, part of the reason that there's so many more women than men is not just because they studied harder and they could meet the academic qualifications and they could get those scholarships, but the colleges, we've done episodes about how it is more and more becoming a system of have and have nots. Like it is
Yeah.
more and more favoring people who, as colleges close, the ones that stay open are the richest ones, and they stay alive because people pay. So that kind of brings us to the question: what do young men do, like in society? Like if they're not going to college, if they're not saving up for a house, no house means basically no wife and no children. We'll just skip to the end there. You cannot be a renter in the current rental market forever and expect to have a prosperous family. If you start a family and you're renting at 2,000 a month or whatever the heck it is in the city, um, you are not going to have that for long. You'll break up, like you'll have fights. Most fights are about money. Most divorces are about money. Um, and when that ends, you're back to square one. So like, what what is a 20, like let's say 14 to 20-year-old men? What are they to do? Like, what do we give them to do?
Well, and about direction, I have something that kind of stuck out to me. How I got into doing a certain thing, because I went into the army. I pursued certain things, factory, tried to work here and there, and then a guy at the gym said to me, "Why would you work in a factory or doing labor jobs when you have a nice personality? You know everyone's name in the gym. You come and talk. You're a young man that can talk. You need to get into sales. You need to go sell cars. This is where you need to go." But no one in my life had ever done that until this dude named Tony at the gym said that.
Okay.
But of all the people, the guidance counselors, the teachers, my parents, you know what I mean? All the people at church who care about me, know me the best. No one ever said that to me until he did. So shouldn't there be some kind of evaluation or some kind of coaching of what's next? And their whole thing is you need to do something with your life. It's very generic.
Right.
It's an ocean of information, right? You need to, what though?
And the question is, what though? And a lot of times, people's answer for what though is, "Well, get an education," but they don't tell you how. Like, it's
Right. Just
without.
go to community college and then go to regular school. But literally, that's just as generic as do something, right?
Right, exactly. Um, so we're. By the way, when I mentioned the suicides thing, the very 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 sad answer is, without giving young men anything to do, a lot of them are turning to suicide. Like, when I say a lot, again, we will link to our numbers and the articles we use. Um, so teen suicide is skyrocketing. It's tripled, in the past decade, which is unheard of in history, really. But boys and men, of those ages that I talked about, 14 to mid 20s, they are committing suicide at a rate of 3 to 1 in civilized countries. Um,
Do you know if these things, and I don't know if your research has turned this up, are the most, I think the majority of these kids who commit suicide are probably living at home with their parents. They're not the ones you described who are out scraping for the apartment and this and that.
Absolutely.
Isn't that weird?
Well, it's because they're literally not doing anything. It's because one,
But
we've
doesn't it seem like
given
the one that who's out there losing their girlfriend in their apartment, which you and I both were?
the one who's fighting for it should be the one
Yeah,
that,
that'd be
yeah.
the one that has the real problems, and the one living at home who can save all their money and work when they want and go to the gym and do whatever they want. They would seem like they doesn't it seem?
They should, yeah, the one who's fighting and losing, should be the one to do it. Whereas I think it is, I think it's depression. Depression rates are skyrocketing too. I think it is. It, okay, there's a good question to start with here. Why aren't older people committing suicide at this rate if we are all facing huge economic crunch? And I think the reason is because, people who are older know what to fight for, and they also know where to put their efforts and work. And they've already gotten, advice. Like, they've already met Tony, your guy Tony. They've already met a Tony in their life who has been like, yeah, the market isn't favoring this type of degree right now. Go get a certification for, cybersecurity, or, houses are unaffordable right now. Just buy a small piece of land for cheap and put a trailer on it, because you don't have to have the same, building permits and things like that. They don't have that kind of advice or that person to listen to. And not
They're
only that,
stagnant. They're stagnant as they get more depressed and more.
right, exactly. And without having that good advice from somebody who is solid and available, they go online. And the problem with going online is, not everybody is listening to Radiolab or The Economist or Freakonomics or us. What they are listening to is, they are typing in simple things like, how do I become more masculine? How do I
How do I gain confidence? Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That is a much better phrase, and that's actually something that gets looked up. How do I gain confidence? How to get more money quickly? How do I make money? How do I secure myself? And the answers they get are the most clickbaity bullshit answers. They get Andrew Tate, a online pro men masculine dude who gives terrible advice, and they get advice like buy crypto, uh, um, go into a volatile stock, invest in the stock market, but do it in something that has such drastic up and down swings that are mostly grifts. They're mostly pump and dump stocks, and they're mostly things that will, like, you'll have your ass handed to you and you'll lose all your money. So like what little they had will go to buying pro male classes, and there's like have you seen the masculine boot camps
Well,
where
I
like it
haven't.
tries to teach you to be alpha again?
Well, when you talked to me about this episode, I started watching some of these, and I thought you were exaggerating. But and what Joe talked to me about offline was about how these young men are taught to how to talk to women, and I was horrified. This,
Yeah.
talk down to them, and then let them chase after you, and then be aloof, to say the least. And I was thinking,
Negging.
oh no, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
And nor should it, nor do we want it to work. We don't want women. We don't want to treat women that way, and we don't want what kind of relationship that's forming. That it's destructive. It's toxic at best.
Yeah, the things young men are looking for answers to is how do I get money so I can eventually get a house? And they're looking for things that are risky and volatile. How do I get women? Because they're not going to approach me if I don't have an education, a future, or money. And the answer to that is, well, get into pickup artists. Pickup artists are exactly what you're talking about. It's these guys that game the system. They tell you how to go to a party and make a woman feel bad so that like they will, you lower their self-esteem so that they will agree to give you their number, or go out with you, or have sex. And it's, how do I feel more confident? Well, you follow these real masculine douchebags online who portray an excessive amount of confidence and wealth, when in reality a lot of it is they're renting the car, they're taking pictures in private jets that they are going to photo shoots to do. Like it's a online culture built around appealing to 14 to mid 20-year-old men, telling them they can still get all these things without a degree and without hard work, especially since most of it's closed off to them, like economically. Unless they have a actual economist for a uncle, they're not going to get any of these things, and they know it. So it's either follow the wrong trail, and the one that, honestly, the people I'm talking about, they game the system so hard that it's not even funny. So like, if I'm looking for more confidence, the guy that is selling alpha male boot camps for me to attend, where they scream at you and tell you, be a man, and they try to get you to bring out your alpha male. They are buying up Google advertising. They are going to YouTube and they're gaming the YouTube algorithm. They are the thing that will show up when you look up how to gain your confidence back. Um,
It's not the healthier behaviors, like become more interesting.
right.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't want to go off on the thing about living at home and the suicide thing. Living at home has its strings attached too, and parents become very, very depressed too when they see their kids doing nothing, and that kind of shows its face as, you know, you need to do something with your life.
Right.
You're getting browbeat. Yeah, you're not paying rent, but you are home taking abuse. I'm not saying that all parents are,
Right.
they
But
want to get that kid out of the house. They want them to do something so they can be proud of them, right?
when we covered, we had the episode about people losing faith in college. Um, it's the same rate of parents who will no longer help their kids get into college. Like it's 50% of young men are no longer, like, the it used to be something like 98% under the Clinton administration, or before then, of young men said they were going to go to college or at least try. Now it's 50, and it's also 50% in the parents category too. So their kids are crashing on their couch and the parents don't have an answer for them. They're saying do something with your life, get an education, make money, do these things, but they don't have a way to tell them to do that. They don't have a path. They're just trying to push their kids into finding a path, and what they're finding is there isn't one really. Like there's there's always a path for the hard worker who goes out and like literally shakes a boss's hand. But now AI is sorting through applications for jobs. You don't get your foot in the door anymore until you have an AI sort your application into the correct bin, and then a boss looks at that application once it's sorted into the bin. So like that folksy wisdom of just go out and make a life for yourself by grit and determination, you really honestly can't do that unless you feel like trespassing somebody's business and like meeting somebody and networking hard and persistently.
That seemed like you'd be better off buying a lottery, or likely if you just got a lottery ticket, right? It's not, it's not going to happen. Not
If
for
you're
everybody.
uneducated and you don't want to work in customer service, then yeah, that's basically it. Is you're playing the lottery. um, this sounds very very grim. Like I keep saying things like that, and I don't want people to think that I am an ultra cynic, that I am so down on the American economy that I don't think there are options for people who aren't educated. But the suicide rates and the statistics and the pay scale, it all bears this out. You honestly are just looking at a warehouse job for Amazon or Walmart if you don't get something. And to get something when you're a a young man, it's impossible. Like it is. You really do need a level of mentorship. You need a consistent presence in your life who has the connections and the opportunity under their belt. They know where the opportunities are.
Well, I could tell you the overall attitude of the parents of these young men, because I'm their age of the parents, and I know um, two things. They have an overall. My friend who's going through some things. He has two teenage sons right now, and he's kind of having that thing where he's frustrated. And he said, "These kids are doing what we did, just enough to get by, and I don't see a future for them." And he's one that's really out there kind of looking and trying to find avenues, and I commend him for that, for being supportive and actually being selective in what, in what paths. But the overall mentality from every other parent that I know, and these are good people, these are people with great careers, very successful, is nobody helped me, they need to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like literally, like, and of course that's fucking total bullshit. They've had millions of people, they've had lots of people help them, and lots of luck. Like I had Tony, and I've had you, but to say that I walked uphills both ways and no one ever helped me, blah blah blah. It's just total bullshit.
Well, let's also talk about anybody who was born before 2008. If you were born before the economy started favoring corporations more than people, then the economy helped you. Like, even if you literally never had a Tony in your life, or you didn't have a Joe or Todd in your life to talk about, what's a path to get to where you want that is still valid. And honestly, parents can't answer that question oftentimes anymore. It really just takes an investigator or a professional licensed career counselor or a professional licensed student counselor. Like it takes a real expert to know that path. And if you don't have that mentor, then what you're looking at is you're looking at terrible advice that will lead you in the wrong direction until you exhaust yourself and you're ready to quit. Um, and the I didn't get help attitude. There were grants. There were not just scholarships. There were grants available to go to college for most people before a certain age. Like it's I don't remember when it cut off, but like the Pell Grant and things like that. So I don't want to keep directing all of our attention or all of my attention toward college. I think this is more about sort of like um, uh, what kind of advice we can give without saying it's all about higher education. And a good source for that, we talked about on a past episode, the TED Talk that just came out by Scott Galloway, the guy that wrote The Algebra of Wealth. Um, he talks about how it's your career as a young person is like rocket fuel, and I love this metaphor that he uses. He talked in an interview about how when you send a rocket up into space, so much of the energy, like 95% of the energy and the effort and the stress is used just getting out of the atmosphere. Just the incredible dense, soupy atmosphere that we have. And then once you're out in space, there's nothing. It's a vacuum. It's clear. It's empty. You just have to have little bursts of energy to direct you better and to set your course. But even like the space station can stay in orbit indefinitely because it just sits in free fall around the Earth and it goes into orbit. And that's what work is like when you are young. Is It's the hardest work you'll ever do. It seems like it's going to take forever. It will take up 95% of your energy to get to a stable place in your career, and then once you're there, as he put it, once you've escaped the atmosphere, work kind of does itself. You can cruise. And that's once you have a house, that's once you have good investments, you have a Roth IRA, you have things set aside, like you have not just investments, you have assets that make you money back, and then it just becomes sort of the rocket ship floating.
I have a personal question to ask you about that because I think we're both in a similar boat. Before we got established and got in our living situations with our partners now, we were living in places that were, I guess you'd say, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's why we were out doing so much shit. We were out doing stuff, joining clubs because we didn't want to go home, and that kind of helped us. Kind of that cockroach, you know what I mean? Like it kind of because I'll tell you why. Because now I'm getting to be this old married man. I don't want to go out. I'm so comfortable at home. But I wasn't. It wasn't always like that, with the noise and and my food being eaten, and with the roommates and so
Right.
there's something to that.
Yeah, I think that is accurate. I don't know if it's not wanting to go home to your crappy roommates who are eating all your food and farting up the room and making everything uncomfortable. I think a lot of it too is just like if you don't have a place to put that energy.
Yeah,
I was.
you're out seeking, looking, right? You're exploring
That's exactly right. I felt like a mouse who is just wandering rooms looking for a seed or
yeah
a nut to take home
for
and to
something to,
stash.
for something to work, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was out looking for. Is I wasn't necessarily looking for a job. I was out looking for like a life path. I was trying to listen to everyone I could for advice on what the hell do I do to build a life if I know that the current the wisdom my parents gave me to make a life doesn't work anymore. I was out looking for new wisdom, and it's so hard to do that and get something reliable back. Um, there's there's a really good quote I want to talk to you about. Um, so I talked about when I was a teenager and young 20s, I spent all of my time on video games. Um, I eventually broke out of that by getting night jobs and just working my butt off with writing. Writing, just spending time becoming a writer and like doing nothing but contests and doing nothing but speech contests and nothing but writing
Well,
contests and
well
doing all
let's
the
talk
yeah.
about what you're doing before, though, when you're just playing video games. What you
Yeah,
got to give me how many hours and why that was beginning to become like a problem.
addictive levels. It was 10 to 12 hours a day. It's not necessarily that I was like interacting with the game all that time. I would have it on in the background and I would go back to it here and there in between things.
That's quite a bit, though.
Oh no, that's straight
I
up
mean, we're only,
addiction
you
levels.
sleep 8 hours. It's not
Yeah.
that many hours left.
No. Addiction is defined by its consequences, and that there were consequences to that. Yeah.
What were the consequences?
You lose friends unless they're playing video games with you. You can't like you're less reliable because you can like, well, I'll go into work an hour late because there's like something happening in the game I can't miss. There's a raid going on or there's an event or something. You sleep less because a lot of it is like, well, if I just wake up 2 hours earlier and drink caffeine, I'll be able to be on for a special event or whatever. And it was mass multiplayer games online, so like I was playing with other people, which made it seem like it was important and made it seem like it was had
Community,
weight.
right?
Yeah, it was community.
And competition. It seems sporty. It can be deceivingly seeming as sporty, right?
Not only does it seem that way, and it gets you socialization when you otherwise wouldn't have it, especially as a young man. Um, okay, there's a great quote from the comedian Jimmy Carr, who was he's not funny when he's in interviews. He actually is weirdly smart. But he said something about how video games are analogs for careers and home, and I was like, that is the smartest thing I've ever heard, because that's honestly what was happening. Is I didn't have a career trajectory because I was an uneducated scrub at the time, and I didn't have a plan for a career. I was just taking crappy night jobs, and his reasoning is most video games you play now, one of the features they have in it that they used to not like video games used to be like Pong,
Mhm.
or like or you got
Mario
into
Brothers.
Mario,
Mario
yeah, or
Brothers, yeah.
you would play games that had a straight a linear progression. You just went through the game and you beat the challenges.
Right. It became like
Now,
meditation. It really did.
yeah, now all games have a home building function. I swear to God, like you play Skyrim, which is about slaying dragons, it lets you build a house. You play Fallout, which is about surviving the apocalypse. You get to build a house at some point. All games now have a home building function. All games now have a function where you get married. Most of them have they're called romance options, which means
So,
you meet
so,
someone and get married.
so you can live a better life through this. And you actually get that dopamine that you're actually, look, I've got a beautiful wife and a house.
That is 100% it. And when he said that in his interview, he's like, "No, video games are an analog for career, home, and a life." And I'm like, it has the same progression. It has the same system of elevation. Like you
Yeah, you
gain
get
experience.
powerful. You
Yeah,
attract somebody, and then you get wealth, and
you
then
get the experience, and then you get more money for doing the things that you're doing in the game. So it's like, no, that is dead on. And most addictions for young men who haven't succumbed to absolute depression, mostly addictions weirdly are taking the spot of what they should be doing, which is building a house, building a career, building a social network. So a lot of our addictions hit those buttons that we need to hit.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
statistically, men 15 to 24. I mean, this is from 2022 report. Spend about 4 hours a day playing video games. That's the average, and we know it's probably a little bit low, right?
yeah, and that's not even talking to the people who are um,
But that's too
it's
much. That's
right. That's the average, not the median or mean. Like that is there
yeah,
are people who are skewing the average way up with
yeah,
addiction. So yeah, it's instead of following people who are like giving out confidence advice, or advice on how to pick up women, or smoking cigars, wearing sunglasses, and going shirtless in their YouTube videos and telling young men that you need to be an alpha. Honestly, we need more people who are just very, very solid financial and career advisors. We need people who can give legit answers and can take a young person aside and be like, hey, the systems you are working toward right now, or the systems your parents think will work, they won't. Go build a tiny house on your own piece of land, but make it to where it's like interconnected to the metro, or go do this a lot of it involves leaving the most populated areas right now where housing is unobtainable, or it means going through education as a trade, but not certain trades, because some of them, like, you'll get charged as much as if you're getting a normal degree. There are some states now where they're offering free trade school if you go into certain trades or make a deal with different, like a nursing program will sometimes now pay you to be a nurse, and they'll pay for your education if you sign up for them for 2 years.
but I think there's something to
Um,
be said for improving yourself. Period. And cost is cost, but I think when you start down that road, other opportunities happen that aren't always visible, and even to your mentor won't be.
yeah,
You know, but when you build trust by getting in a direction, getting in some kind of lane of improvement, I think
that's.
great things happen.
I don't mean to keep it cutting you off, but it's because I'm so excited because you keep saying very, very important and helpful things. It's starting the momentum, starting that rocket ship going,
Yes,
getting
yes,
into a
yes.
lane, and then once you're in progress, like once you are firing the boosters, that's when you start like adjusting and correcting, and you meet people who tell try this, do this, like all the things I'm talking about that are like good advice that fly against conventional wisdom. I learned that by being in motion. Like I learned it by having the rockets going. So we need people who will help them get off the ground for just the first 10 inches, and then the rest of the atmosphere is theirs. Like they have to have that initial boost to go. And it means working with less. It means they're going to have to get good advice on how to have a shit job and to sustain yourself for a while, with a ton of roommates or with your parents or something. Like you will have to take those bad options first as you work toward the slightly better ones, and as you work toward unconventional jobs, unconventional ways to get education, unconventional ways to get a house of your own, and listening to them. Something very very smart that you told me is you were saying you worked with a lot of young men and that a lot of them just want to be heard.
Yeah, the listening part is a big one, and one of the things you're going to hear when you start listening to men in their from their 18s to 25s, they're going to have some theories that are very destructive. And one of the common ones I hear is, and we live here in Portland, and well, Joe's now, and he's moved on to Austin, Texas, but he used to live here. A lot of them have a plan of they're going to live in their truck. And it never made sense to me. They're like, I'm going to live in my truck for 2 years and save up enough to, and now it kind of does, because I think they're buying into that. They're going to be able to get some kind of place if they're willing to, no pain, no gain kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And so as an older person, you know right away that what they're saying is not a good idea. It's not sustainable. It's not safe. And these are not dumb people. They're not. You say, well, these simple dumb kids. They're not. They're just
Yeah.
desperate. And if you can, when I was a young man, I used to go to this church, and we served at this church. My mom was very involved in this church. It's a Presbyterian church, and the pastor Ken used to come over to my house about once a month, and he would just play basketball with me and listen to me. It wasn't a God, it wasn't a Bible study. And that was very powerful to me. And I didn't realize that till much later. And how I kind of realized what he did for me. 'Cause sometimes these things don't dawn into you, the kindness of people in your life, of male mentors, and it's a different relationship. Like the Tony, the guy who told me to get into sales, Pastor Ken, who used to listen to me. They don't have the authority of your parents, and you don't feel like you're being scolded like you are by your parents. So they genuinely care for you, and they don't have anything at stake either. So it's kind of nice. But I worked for Labor Ready when I was down and out. I was in my 30s and drug, alcohol problems. I mean, I was flirting with homelessness, and I would work with these very young men every day, and I would always bring lunch. And I knew that the young men I was working with would not bring food, because 20 somethings do not, they don't bring food.
Right.
And I used to share my lunch with them. And I have to tell you, Joe, they would light up that an older man, an uncle-age man, would listen to them. I mean, these real tough kind of street kids were just so flattered that I gave them attention and asked about their girlfriend and their day and what they like to do. And I think if all of us listened and gave attention and some direction, and not in an overbearing, you got to do something with your life, but in a caring listening, and say, hey, there's as many ways to make $1 million as there is. It's not all education. There are a lot of ways to be successful in life. And I believe in you. If they just did that, just like the way Tony did to me, I think a lot of the suicide rate for young men would go down significantly.
I think that is profound, and I think you're right. I think that telling young men that there is hope, but that it's not going to come from a single source of advice. It's not going to come from a parent telling them to take college loans anymore. It's not going to come from somebody telling you go live in a van 2 years while you save up for a down payment on a house. It's there's this physics experiment or thought experiment where if you were out in space and you aimed a pistol at the nearest planet, or sorry, the nearest solar system, and you shot a bullet at the other solar system, the solar system you shot a bullet at, it would never reach it because the universe is expanding at a fast enough rate to where the expansion would outdistance your bullet over time. Like
Oh, wow.
and that's what living in a van and saving up for a down payment feels like. It's
Right. 'Cause everything's
you
going up while you're saving, right?
right. You get a crappy job, you live in a van, you're saving, let's say generously you're saving like a couple $1,000s a month. Well, you start living in a van and home prices are going up faster than that. Like it's
Yeah.
you might as well be standing still. You might as well shoot a bullet at the nearest solar system because the expansion is going faster than what you're capable of saving. You really do have to like think unconventionally and think in ways where you have to find good sources, and those good sources are not going to come from alpha male specialists or coaches or Andrew Tate or all these people who are offering younger men this advice of you just need to be more aggressive. Obviously, more aggressive isn't working. Like, obviously, being an alpha isn't working. What will work is networking, socializing, meeting people, and honestly being nice. Being not just nice, being a gentleman. There's something that Carr said in his interview, which came from Christopher Hitchens, and this is probably the best. I think the best piece of advice I could ever give to a younger person, if I were giving advice to a young Joe, like I asked you the hypothetical, what would you tell your younger self? I would give the advice of, avoid these careers, don't waste time on video games, and a gentleman is never rude unless they mean to be. I think is actually what he said.
No, I know what you meant. I think that's all very wise, and I agree with all that 100%.